No one approached the millionaire until the beggar's boy dried his tears. Richard Thompson was known throughout Sacramento as the man who turned a small family business into one of the largest food distributors in the Central Valley. But on that Thursday afternoon, sitting on the stone bench in Centennial Square, he was just a middle-aged man crying alone, his suit wrinkled and his tie loosely hanging over his chest. That's when a small, dirty hand gently touched his tear-streaked face. "Don't be sad, mister," said a sweet, childlike voice. Richard raised his reddened eyes and saw a boy no older than 5, wearing old but clean clothes with messy brown hair and big, curious eyes. The child watched him with a serious expression, as if he perfectly understood his pain. "When I cry, my dad always says tomorrow will be better," the boy continued, his little hand still on the businessman's face. Richard stayed silent, unsure how to react. It had been years since anyone approached him without wanting something. Employees, suppliers, even acquaintances always came with proposals, requests, or flattery. But this child was simply offering comfort. "What's your name?" Richard asked, trying to wipe his tears with the back of his hand. "Tommy, but everyone calls me Tommy. And you?" "Richard." "Nice to meet you, Tommy." The boy smiled and sat beside him on the bench, swinging his little legs that didn't reach the ground. "My dad's sleeping under that tree." He pointed to a man lying on cardboard beneath an oak tree. "He said he needed to rest because he worked a lot today." Richard looked in the direction and saw a man around 40, thin, with unshaven stubble and worn-out clothes. Even from a distance, he could tell he was homeless. "Do you live here in the square?" "Not really. We stay here sometimes. My dad says this tree is lucky because it's really old and has seen lots of good things happen." The child's innocence touched something deep in the businessman's heart. Tommy spoke about their situation as if it were completely normal, without a hint of bitterness or self-pity. "And your mum, where is she?" The boy lowered his head for a moment. "She left when I was a baby, but Daddy takes good care of me. He knows how to read and write really well, and he teaches me lots of things." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. He had lost his own family in a car accident 3 years earlier. His wife Jennifer and daughter Emily had gone out shopping and never returned. Since then, he had shut himself off from the world, obsessively throwing himself into work to try and forget the pain. "Tommy, are you hungry?" The boy hesitated before answering. "A little. But Daddy said he'd get money for dinner today." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Richard pulled out his wallet and saw he only had large bills. He stood and walked to a diner on the corner of the square where he bought 2 sandwiches, 2 orders of fries, and 2 sodas. When he returned, he found Tommy gently waking his father. "Daddy, the man in the suit bought food for us." The man quickly got up, still half asleep, and eyed Richard suspiciously. "No need, thank you. We don't ask for handouts," he said with dignity, despite their situation. "It's not a handout," Richard replied. "Your son kept me company while I was going through a hard time. It's just a thank you." Tommy's father studied him for a few seconds, noticing the expensive suit, the designer watch, and the posture of a successful man. "Michael Davis," he said, extending his hand, "and you've already met my son, Richard Thompson." The 2 men greeted each other, and Richard couldn't help but notice the firmness of Michael's handshake, as well as how his hands, though calloused, were clean. "Daddy, can I eat?" asked Tommy, his eyes shining as he looked at the sandwiches. "Of course, son." As they ate, Richard observed the interaction between father and son. Michael made sure Tommy got the first and best portion, constantly attentive to the boy's needs. The love between them was evident. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you end up?" Richard hesitated, unsure how to phrase the question without sounding offensive. "On the street," Michael finished, unbothered. "It's a long story. I used to be a college professor, believe it or not." "A professor? Of what?" "History. I taught at the State University of Sacramento. Had a good life. My own apartment, a car, until everything fell apart." Richard waited for him to continue, but Michael simply said, "We'd rather not talk about the past. What matters is we're together and moving forward." For the next hour, the three talked about various things. Richard was impressed by Tommy's intelligence and Michael's knowledge. The boy could do simple math in his head and knew the names of several countries. Michael, in turn, showed understanding of literature, history, and even economics. As it grew dark, Richard said goodbye, but he couldn't stop thinking about them the whole way back to his empty mansion in Granite Bay. The next morning, a Friday, Richard woke earlier than usual. For the first time in months, he hadn't needed sleeping pills the night before. It had been so long since he'd felt so human. Throughout the morning meeting at the office, his thoughts drifted back to the square. Were Michael and Tommy still there? Had they found somewhere to spend the night? "Mr. Thompson." The voice of his secretary, Mrs. Jenkins, a woman in her 60s who had worked with him for over a decade, brought him back to reality. "Yes, Martha." "Are you all right? You seem different today." Richard looked around the conference room and realized all the executives were watching him curiously. Apparently, he'd lost track of the quarterly results presentation. "I'm fine, just a little distracted. Let's continue on Monday. That's all for today." The employees left the room murmuring about their boss's unusual behavior. Richard Thompson was known for his punctuality, focus, and extreme demands during meetings. At noon, Richard left the office and went straight to the square. His heart raced when he saw Michael and Tommy sitting under the same oak tree. The man was showing the boy something in an old book. "Richard!" Tommy shouted when he saw him approaching, running to hug his legs. The boy's spontaneous gesture moved him. It had been so long since anyone had shown genuine joy at seeing him. "Hi, Tommy." "Hi, Michael." "What a nice surprise," Michael said, closing the book. "We didn't expect to see you again." "I was passing by and, well, I thought I'd check on you." In truth, Richard had cancelled 2 important meetings just to come. "What book is that?" he asked, sitting on the ground beside them. "It's about the planets," Tommy said excitedly. "Daddy was teaching me about the solar system." Richard took the book and saw it was a well-worn but well-kept children's encyclopedia. "Where did you get this?" "Found it in a dumpster behind the central library," Michael explained. "People throw away books in perfect condition. Tommy and I always check there." "I know all the planet names," Tommy said proudly. "Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune." Richard smiled. It was amazing how that boy could be so cheerful and curious despite their circumstances. "Very good. You're a very smart boy. Dad says education is the only thing no one can take away from us." Tommy's words echoed in Richard's mind for the rest of the day. That evening, he did something he hadn't done in years. Had dinner at Arden Fair Mall, walking among the stores and watching families. For the first time since the accident, he didn't feel completely alone in the world. On Saturday morning, Richard arrived at Centennial Square, carrying bags from a supermarket. He found Michael teaching Tommy how to write with a stick in the dirt. "Good morning," Tommy said, dropping the stick and running toward him. "Good morning, everyone. I brought some things." Richard pulled sandwiches, fruit, milk, cookies, and water from the bags. "Richard, this is too much," Michael protested. "We can't accept this. Please let me do this. Last night I thought a lot and I realized you've given me something very valuable." "What?" "Company. For 3 years I've lived completely alone. I have no family, no real friends. Everyone who gets close to me wants something in return. You're the first people who simply cared." Michael and Richard looked at each other in silence for a moment, both understanding that this was the beginning of something special. All weekend, Richard spent his days in the square with his new friends. He discovered that Michael was truly an educated man, and Tommy an exceptional boy. The child could read simple words and loved stories. By Monday, Richard had trouble focusing at work. His mind was on the square, worried about Michael and Tommy. How were they getting through the day? Where would they sleep if it rained? "Mr. Thompson," Mrs. Jenkins entered his office with a concerned expression. "Are you sure you're all right? These past few days you've been very different." "Different how?" "More human, if I may say so. I haven't seen you smile in years." Richard laughed. Mrs. Jenkins had always been very direct, one of the few people at the company who spoke frankly with him. "Something good happened in my life, Jenkins. I met some special people." The secretary smiled. "That's wonderful, sir. You deserve to be happy." That afternoon, Richard decided to act. He couldn't stand by any longer, watching Michael and Tommy live on the streets. He left work early and went straight to the square. "Michael, I need to talk to you about something serious." "What is it?" "I want to help you get off the streets." Michael immediately tensed. "Richard, we've talked about this. We don't want charity." "It's not charity. It's friendship. Friends help each other. You don't know our story. You don't know what we've been through." "Then tell me." Michael looked at Tommy, who was playing with some pebbles a few feet away. "It's complicated." "I have time." Michael took a deep breath and began to speak, keeping his voice low so Tommy wouldn't hear. 2 years ago, I was a tenured history professor at the State University of Sacramento. I had a good life, was engaged to a colleague. Everything changed when a student made a false accusation against me. Richard waited in silence. "She said I'd made inappropriate advances, that I'd conditioned her grade on favors. It was a lie, but in a time when these cases are in the spotlight, no one wants to take risks. I was suspended immediately for investigation." "And Tommy?" "His mother left me when she heard about the accusation, said she wouldn't stay with a man like that. She took only her clothes and disappeared. Tommy was 3 at the time." Richard felt anger at the injustice of it all. "And the investigation?" "It lasted 6 months. In the end, they couldn't prove anything because there was nothing to prove. But the damage was done. My reputation was destroyed. I lost my job, my fiancé, my friends. I had to sell everything to pay the lawyer and support Tommy. But if you were cleared..." "Richard, you don't understand how it works. Once your reputation is tarnished like that, no one wants to hire you. I tried to find work in other cities, other universities, even private schools. Every time they searched my name online, the news about the accusation would come up." Richard began to understand the magnitude of the problem. "And Tommy doesn't know any of this?" "Of course not. He was too young when it happened. I just told him we moved because Daddy got a new job. Every time he asks why we don't have a home, I say we're saving up to buy a really nice one." "Michael, this is terrible. I'm so sorry." "The worst part is the girl graduated just fine. I found out by chance that she confessed to some classmates she made it all up because she had bad grades and wanted revenge. But it was already too late for me." Richard fell silent, processing the story. It was infuriating how a lie could completely destroy a person's life. "That's why I won't accept help from anyone," Michael continued. "I've been humiliated enough. I'd rather keep my dignity and take care of my son the best I can." "But you can't keep living like this. What about Tommy? He needs to go to school, have a normal life." "I know. I'm trying to save up to rent a small room somewhere. So I take odd jobs here and there when someone hires me to move things or clean up a yard. But it's hard because I can't leave Tommy alone." Richard spent the night thinking about the situation. The next morning, he reached out to a lawyer he knew to explore legal options to clear Michael's name. "Richard, if the charges were dropped for lack of evidence, technically his record is clean," explained attorney William Brooks, a criminal defense lawyer who worked with his company. "The problem is the damage to his reputation. That's harder to undo. But there must be something we can do. Well, if we could prove the accusation was deliberately false, we could file a lawsuit for emotional distress against the girl. That would result in a court ruling officially declaring his innocence. With that, it'd be easier for him to find work." "And how would we prove it?" "We'd need witnesses who heard her confess to the lie, or some documented evidence. Text messages, emails, recordings." Richard left the lawyer's office with an idea. If he couldn't fix Michael's past right away, at least he could ensure a better present for him and Tommy. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That afternoon, Richard arrived at the square with a different proposal. "Michael, what if I offered you a job?" "What kind of job?" "I need someone to organize the company's historical archives." My family founded the distribution business 50 years ago, and we have piles of documents, photos, newspaper clippings, all just thrown in boxes in storage. I'd like to organize it properly, maybe even write a book about the company's history. Michael seemed interested for the first time. That would suit my background. Exactly. It's work that requires historical knowledge, research skills, and organization. I can pay a fair wage with benefits. Richard, Before you say no, let me finish. I have a guest house on my property that's been empty for years. You could stay there. Tommy would be near a good school, you'd have a decent job, and well, I'd have the company I need. Michael was silent for a long time, clearly wrestling with himself. Why are you doing this? Because you two changed my life. For 3 years, I was dead inside. Tommy reminded me there's still kindness in the world, and you showed me true friendship is priceless. Daddy, Tommy tugged at Michael's pants. Can I play in the little house Uncle Richard talked about? Michael looked at his son, and then at Richard. If it's just to humiliate us later, I'd rather not even start. Michael, look me in the eyes. Richard gripped his friend's shoulders. I lost my family. You two are the only family I have left now. I would never do anything to hurt you. Tears streamed down Michael's face. All right, we'll try. Tommy squealed with joy and hugged both men's legs at once. The next day, Richard took Michael and Tommy to see the guest house. It was small but cozy, with 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and bathroom. It's so nice, Tommy exclaimed, running from room to room. Daddy, can I pick which bedroom is mine? Of course, son. While Tommy explored the house, Richard showed Michael the storage room where the company files were kept. My God, Michael said, staring at the dozens of stacked boxes. This will take months. No rush, I want it done right. Over the next few weeks, a routine settled in. Richard picked up Michael and Tommy every morning, dropping Tommy off at school and Michael at work. In the afternoons, he collected Tommy from school, and the 3 had dinner together before heading home. The change was remarkable. Tommy thrived in school, making friends quickly and excelling in class. Michael threw himself into organizing the files with a passion he hadn't shown in years. Richard, in turn, rediscovered the joy of simple living, helping Tommy with homework, listening to the stories Michael uncovered in old documents, sharing family dinners, small things that filled the emptiness in his heart. But not everything was perfect. At the company, some employees began questioning their boss's changed behavior, especially Robert Mitchell, the sales director, who had spent years angling for a larger stake in the business. Richard's acting strange, Robert remarked to other executives over lunch, leaving early, less strict, almost distracted. Maybe it's good for him, suggested Sarah Johnson, the CFO. He was working himself to death. Or maybe it's bad for the company, Robert countered. Have you heard he's been supporting some homeless family? What kind of image does that send? The gossip reached Mrs. Jenkins, who immediately told Richard, Sir, people are speaking ill of you because of your friendship with Michael and Tommy. What are they saying? Nonsense. That you're losing focus, that it could hurt the company. Just jealous chatter. Richard grew worried, not for himself, but for Michael and Tommy. If this turned into a scandal, it could further damage Michael's reputation. His concerns deepened when, on Friday, Robert requested a private meeting. Richard, I need to talk to you about a delicate matter. Go ahead. It's about this personal project of yours with the former teacher and the boy. Richard felt his blood boil. What about it? Well, I did a little digging into Michael Davis's past. Richard shot up from his chair. You did what? Calm down, Richard. I was concerned for you. I found some interesting things. Robert placed a folder on the desk. This man was fired from the university for sexual harassment. There was a criminal case. Are you sure it's safe to have him around a child? Michael was cleared. The case was dismissed. But the suspicion remains, and now you've brought him into our company. If this leaks to the press, imagine the damage to our reputation. Richard grabbed the folder and threw it in the trash. Robert, I'll say this once. Michael is my friend and Tommy is like a son to me. If you or anyone else in this company tries to harm them, you'll have to deal with me personally. Richard, be reasonable. You're getting emotionally involved in a situation that could blow up in your face. The meeting is over. Leave." Robert Mitchell walked out of the room with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That night, Richard told Michael Davis about the conversation. "I knew this would happen," said Michael, visibly shaken. "It always does. Maybe Tommy and I should leave before this hurts you." "No, we won't let people like Robert win. You've done nothing wrong." "Richard, you don't understand. It doesn't matter how many times I prove my innocence, there will always be doubt. Then let's put an end to that doubt once and for all." The next day, Richard went to see attorney William Brooks again. "Attorney, I want you to investigate Michael Davis's case thoroughly. I need evidence that definitively proves his innocence." "Richard, this could be expensive and time-consuming. I don't care about the cost, and as for time, the sooner, the better." The attorney began the investigation immediately. Meanwhile, tensions in the company grew. Robert started spreading rumors among the employees about the concerning situation involving their boss. The pressure reached its peak when, on a Wednesday afternoon, Richard was called into an extraordinary meeting of the company's board of directors. "Richard," said the board chairman, Mr. George Reynolds, a 70-year-old man who had been a partner of Richard's father, "we're concerned about some of your recent decisions." "What decisions?" "We know you hired a man with a controversial past. That could pose a risk to the company." Richard looked around the table at the faces of the board members. Some looked worried, others clearly influenced by Robert, who wasn't on the board but had managed to plant seeds of doubt. "Michael Davis is an exemplary employee who's providing an important service to the company." "Richard," Mr. Reynolds interjected, "you know we all respect your judgment, but we have to think about the company's image. If this story gets out to the press..." "There is no story. There's only an innocent man trying to rebuild his life and a boy who deserves a chance." "But technically he wasn't exonerated from the charges," said another board member. "The case was just dismissed due to lack of evidence, which is the same as innocence in our legal system." The meeting dragged on for 2 hours, with Richard defending Michael against increasingly prejudiced arguments. In the end, he managed to keep his friend's job, but felt he had lost the trust of part of the board. When he got home that night, he found Michael in the kitchen helping Tommy with his math homework. "How was work today, Uncle Richard?" Tommy asked, running to hug him. "It was complicated, champ." Michael immediately sensed something was wrong. "Did something happen?" After Tommy went to bed, Richard told him about the board meeting. "That's it. I'm leaving tomorrow," Michael said. "No, you're not." "Richard, I can't let you lose everything because of me. You don't understand. I'd already lost everything long before I met you and Tommy. You gave me my life back. Now it's my turn to fight for you." The next morning, Richard got a call from attorney Brooks. "Richard, I have news about Michael's case." "What kind of news?" "I found the girl who made the accusation, Megan Parker. She graduated and now works at a consulting firm in San Francisco." "And?" "I spoke with some of her former classmates. One of them, Rachel, is willing to testify. She said that Megan confessed to making up the story because she was getting low grades and wanted to get back at the teacher who refused to give her higher marks." Richard felt a surge of hope. "Is she willing to testify officially?" "Yes, and more. She has WhatsApp conversations from when Megan admitted the lie." "Perfect. What do we need to do?" "I'll file a lawsuit for emotional damages against Megan. With this evidence, we're almost certain to win. The court's decision will clear Michael's name for good." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. As the legal proceedings continued, the pressure at the company grew. Robert had managed to convince more people that Richard was losing his mind because of his friendship with Michael. The situation exploded one Thursday morning when Richard arrived at work and found Robert talking to a reporter from the local paper. "What's going on here?" Richard asked. "Richard," Robert said with a fake smile, "this is journalist Brian Miller. He's doing a piece on corporate social responsibility and wanted to know about your project." Richard immediately saw the trap. Robert had called the press to expose the situation. "Mr. Thompson," the reporter said, Is it true you hired a man accused of sexual harassment? This conversation is over. Richard took the reporter by the arm and escorted him out of the building, but it was too late. The afternoon edition of the paper ran a story with the headline, "Local Businessman Hires Man Accused of Harassment." The article was biased and implied that Richard might be putting his employees at risk by employing Michael. It also mentioned that Michael lived on Richard's property with a young child. When Richard got home, he found Michael packing his bags. "Where do you think you're going?" "Richard, it's on the front page of the paper. I can't stay here anymore." "Michael, Tommy can't grow up with this shadow over us, and you can't lose everything you've built because of us." "Where's Tommy?" "In his room, crying. The boys at school have already started teasing him because of the article." Richard felt an anger he hadn't known in years. How could people be so cruel to an innocent child? "No one's going anywhere. We'll fix this." "How?" "Trust me?" Michael nodded, though clearly reluctant. The next day, Richard called a press conference. Journalists from various local outlets attended, curious to see how the businessman would handle the controversy. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Richard began, "I've called this conference to clarify some facts that were distorted in yesterday's article." Richard told the whole story, from their first meeting in Centennial Square to the current situation. He spoke about Michael's innocence, the injustice he'd suffered, and Tommy's intelligence and kindness. "Michael Davis isn't just my employee, he's my friend. And Tommy isn't just a child in his care, he's like a son to me. If helping people who've faced injustice is controversial, then I proudly say I'm controversial." The press conference made waves. Most outlets highlighted Richard's courage in publicly defending his friends, but there were consequences. 2 days later, Richard was called to another emergency board meeting. "Richard," Mr. George Reynolds said regretfully, "your actions were noble but reckless. Some of our biggest clients are concerned about the company's image." "Which clients?" "Valley Fresh Markets cancelled their contract. They said they don't want to be associated with unnecessary controversy." Richard knew that losing this contract represented about 15% of the company's revenue. "And there's more," another advisor continued. "Capital Valley Bank is questioning the renewal of the loan for the factory expansion." Richard realized he was at a crossroads. He could back down, let Michael go and save his company, or he could stand his ground and risk losing everything. "Gentlemen," Richard said, looking each advisor in the eye, "I understand your concerns, but I won't abandon my friends because of outside pressure. If that means losing a few contracts, so be it." "Richard, think carefully about what you're saying," warned Mr. George Reynolds. "I've already thought about it. My decision is made." In the weeks that followed, the company faced tough times. Besides the clients who cancelled contracts, some employees resigned, influenced by rumors and instability. Robert took advantage of the situation to convince other executives to support his attempt to remove Richard from the presidency. "He's lost his mind," Robert said in informal meetings. "He's risking all our jobs over a personal whim." The pressure at home also grew. Tommy was being teased at school, and Michael felt guilty about the whole situation. "Richard, this has to stop," Michael said one night after Tommy went to bed crying because a classmate called his father a criminal. "It will stop. The attorney said the case is almost over." "What if it doesn't work? What if we can't prove anything?" "It will work. It has to." But Richard was also starting to doubt himself. What if he was really wrong? What if his stubbornness ended up destroying everything his father had built? The answer came on a Monday morning when attorney William Brooks called, his voice trembling with emotion. "Richard, we did it. The judge accepted all the evidence. Megan officially confessed that she fabricated the accusation. Michael has been formally cleared of any wrongdoing." Richard could hardly believe it. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I have the court ruling here declaring that Michael Davis was the victim of a false accusation and that his reputation must be fully restored. Megan was ordered to pay damages for emotional distress." Richard hung up and ran to find Michael, who was in the warehouse organizing documents. "Michael! Michael! What happened? Is something wrong?" Richard hugged him tightly. "We did it. You've been officially cleared. The judge declared you were falsely accused." Michael fell to his knees and began to cry. 3 years of suffering, humiliation, and injustice were finally over. "Tommy can grow up without this shadow over us," he whispered through tears. "Yes, he can. And now we'll show everyone who you really are." Richard organized another press conference, this time to announce the court's decision. The response was immediate and positive. Newspapers that had once questioned his decision now praised his courage in defending an innocent friend. Valley Fresh Markets was the first client to reinstate their contract, followed by several others. The bank also renewed the loan. More importantly, Tommy started smiling again at school. The boys who had teased him now wanted to be his friends, influenced by their parents' change in attitude after reading about the court ruling. Robert, realizing he had backed the wrong horse, resigned and left the company without causing further trouble. 6 months later, Michael had finished organizing the company's entire historical archive and written a fascinating book about its 50-year history. The book was launched at a party that brought together the entire business community of the city. "I want to especially thank my friend Richard Thompson," said Michael during his launch speech, "who taught me that there are still people willing to fight for justice, even when it comes at a high cost." The audience gave a standing ovation. "But most of all, I want to thank my son Tommy, who taught me that a simple act of kindness can change destinies." Richard looked at Tommy, who was sitting in the front row in his best suit, a gift from Richard, proudly applauding his father. That night, the three of them had dinner at home to celebrate. "Uncle Richard," Tommy said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, champ." "When you were crying that day in the square, why were you sad?" Richard glanced at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "I was sad because I felt so alone. I'd lost my family in an accident and didn't know how to go on living." "And now you're not sad anymore?" "No, Tommy. Now I have you. I have a family again. We love you too, Uncle Richard." Richard felt his eyes fill with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. 2 years passed. The business thrived like never before. Tommy became one of the top students in school, and Michael was invited to give talks on resilience at several universities. Richard never felt alone again. Every day he came home knowing Tommy would be waiting with a hug, and that Michael would have an interesting story to share about his work. The guest house had become a true extension of the main house. Richard had a covered walkway built between the two, symbolizing that they were now truly a family. One Sunday afternoon, the three of them were at the square where it all began. It had become a tradition to visit the spot once a month, like a sentimental pilgrimage. "Dad," said Tommy, now 8 years old and more articulate than ever, "do you regret anything?" Michael thought for a moment. "I regret taking so long to accept Uncle Richard's help. Pride sometimes blinds us to the blessings right in front of us." "What about you, Uncle Richard?" "I regret not coming to the square sooner. If I'd met you earlier, I wouldn't have suffered as much." Tommy grew thoughtful. "I think everything happened at the right time. If we'd met sooner, maybe you wouldn't have needed a hug, and I wouldn't have been there to give it." The child's wisdom struck both men. "You know what, Tommy?" Richard said. "You're right. Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to." As the sun set behind the oak trees in the square, Richard reflected on how his life had completely changed. He'd lost one family, but gained another. He'd learned that money can't buy happiness, but kindness can. Michael, too, thought about the past. The injustice he'd suffered had nearly destroyed him, but it had also led him to Richard and the chance to start over. Sometimes what seems like an ending is just a new beginning in disguise. And Tommy, though still a child, already understood something many adults spend a lifetime learning, that love is the only force capable of truly transforming a life. When they got home that night, Richard did something that would become tradition. Before bed, he went to Tommy's room to say goodnight. "Uncle Richard, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "That day in the square, when I touched your face, I wasn't just trying to comfort you. I was asking God to make you part of my family." Richard's heart swelled with emotion. "And your wish came true, champ." "It did. Now there are 3 of us. Forever." "Forever," Richard agreed, kissing the boy's forehead. 5 years had passed since that first meeting in the square. Richard was now 50, Michael 45, and Tommy 10. The company had become one of the most respected in the industry, not just for its financial results, but also for the social program they had created. Inspired by his own experience, Richard founded an institute to help families in vulnerable situations, always focusing on dignity and empowerment. Michael had become the institute's director, applying his academic and personal experience to develop innovative programs. He had also returned to teaching, now as a guest lecturer at several universities, speaking about resilience and new beginnings. Tommy had grown up excelling not only academically, but also as an empathetic and generous child. He often asked to join Richard and Michael on visits to the institute, where he played with other children in difficult situations and always found a way to comfort them. One special Saturday morning, Richard woke up to Tommy jumping on his bed. "Uncle Richard, Uncle Richard, wake up." "What is it, champ? It's still early." "It's Father's Day. I made a gift for you and for Dad." Richard got up curious. Tommy pulled him by the hand to the living room, where Michael was already waiting with a smile. "Close your eyes," Tommy ordered. The two men obeyed, hearing Tommy shuffling something around. "Now you can open them." Richard and Michael opened their eyes and saw a drawing taped to the wall. It depicted 3 stick figures holding hands, labeled Dad Michael, Tommy, and Dad Richard. "You're both my dads," Tommy said solemnly. "Dad Michael made me and Dad Richard made our family." Richard knelt and hugged Tommy, trying not to cry in front of the boy. "This is the best gift I've ever received in my life." "For me too," Michael agreed, joining the hug. At that moment, Richard had an epiphany. For years after losing Jennifer and Emily, he had questioned why bad things happen to good people. Now he understood that sometimes life takes something away to give us something even better. But in a way we'd never expect. He had lost a biological daughter, but gained a son in his heart. He had lost a wife, but gained a brother in spirit. And most of all, he had rediscovered that love has no limits or conventional definitions. That afternoon, they decided to do something special. They went to Centennial Square, but this time not just to remember the past. Tommy had suggested having a picnic there to celebrate the place where our family began. They spread a blanket under the same oak tree where Michael used to sleep years before. Now the tree was a symbol of hope, not despair. As they ate sandwiches and fruit, other visitors to the square greeted them warmly. Their story had become known in the city, and many people found inspiration in it for their own lives. "Look," Tommy said, pointing to a man sitting alone on a bench in the distance. "That man looks sad." Richard and Michael looked where he pointed and saw a middle-aged man with his head down, clearly going through a difficult time. "I think we should go talk to him," Tommy suggested. "Are you sure?" Richard asked. "Maybe he wants to be alone." "Uncle Richard, you wanted to be alone that day too, but sometimes people need someone to reach out even when they don't know it." Tommy's wisdom never ceased to amaze the adults. The 3 of them approached the man gently. "Excuse me," Tommy said in his sweet voice. "Are you okay?" The man lifted his head, and they saw his red, tear-filled eyes. "I'm fine, thank you. Just going through a hard time." "Can I sit here with you?" Tommy asked. "Sometimes talking helps." The man looked at Richard and Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "Sure, son." Tommy sat beside the man, and with the natural ease only children possess, began to talk. Within minutes, they discovered his name was Paul, that he'd recently lost his job and was feeling like a failure. "You know," said Tommy, "my dad Michael also felt that way once, but he taught me that it doesn't matter how many times you fall, what matters is getting back up." Paul smiled for the first time. "Your son is very wise," he said to Michael. "He teaches me every day," Michael replied. Over the next hour, the 4 of them talked. Richard quietly offered to help Paul find a new job, and Michael shared his own story of starting over. When they said goodbye, Paul looked visibly uplifted. "Thank you," he told Tommy. "You reminded me there's still kindness in the world." "There always is," Tommy answered. "Sometimes it's hidden, but it's always there." On the way home, Richard reflected on how kindness spreads. Tommy had learned from them the importance of helping others, but he'd also taught them that help can come from anywhere, even from a 10-year-old. That evening at dinner, Tommy asked a question that caught both men off guard. "Dad, Michael, do you plan to get married again?" Michael nearly choked on his food. "Why do you ask, son?" "Because at school my teacher said families come in all shapes. And I was thinking our family is perfect just the way it is. But if you found someone nice to be my mom, I wouldn't mind." Richard laughed at the boy's honesty. What if it was Uncle Richard who found someone special? Tommy considered the question seriously. "I wouldn't mind either, as long as they were nice and didn't try to change our family, because the way things are, I'm really happy." "We're really happy too," said Michael. "And we'll stay that way no matter what happens in the future," Richard added. 2 years later, on a spring morning, Richard was in his office when Mrs. Jenkins walked in with a strange look. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you, says it's about Tommy." Richard felt a chill in his stomach. "What woman?" "She says her name is Stephanie and that she's Tommy's mother." Richard's world collapsed in that moment. After 7 years of absence, Tommy's birth mother had returned. "Show her in." Stephanie was a woman around 35, well-dressed and seemingly successful. She entered the office with determination. "Mr. Thompson, nice to meet you. I'm Stephanie White, mother of Tommy. Ex-wife of Michael Davis, I know. What do you want?" "I want my son back." Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. "Excuse me?" "I know Michael was cleared of the charges and that you're living comfortably now. I want custody of my son back." "Stephanie, you abandoned Tommy when he was 3. You've been absent from his life for 7 years. I was going through a hard time, but my life is stable now. I have a successful husband, a good home, the means to give Tommy everything he deserves." "Tommy already has everything he deserves. He has love, stability, a family that adores him." "A family made up of 2 single men? That's no proper environment for a child." Richard felt anger rising inside him. "Those 2 single men raised Tommy when you abandoned him. They were there for every tear, every joy, every milestone. Where were you when he learned to read? When he lost his first tooth? When he was being bullied at school?" Stephanie seemed shaken for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. "I know you've taken good care of him and I'm grateful, but now he needs to be with his real mother. Tommy's real mother is anyone who loves him unconditionally, and that's not you." "Mr. Thompson, I didn't come here to fight. I came to settle this civilly. But if necessary, I'll take this to court." Richard knew that legally she had a chance of getting at least shared custody. American law favors the biological mother, even in cases of abandonment. "Stephanie, think carefully about what you're doing. Tommy doesn't know you anymore. To him, you're a stranger. I'm his mother. He'll remember, or he'll learn to know me again. And what if he doesn't want to? He's a child. He doesn't have a choice." That sentence revealed everything Richard needed to know about Stephanie. She saw Tommy as a possession, not as a person with his own feelings and will. "I need to talk to Michael and Tommy about this. You have 1 week. If we don't reach an agreement, I'll get a lawyer." Stephanie left the office, leaving Richard in shock. When he got home that night, he found Michael and Tommy in the living room, Tommy doing homework while Michael helped him. "Daddy, Richard." Tommy ran to hug him as he always did. Richard held him tighter than usual, trying to imprint the moment in his memory. After Tommy went to bed, Richard told Michael everything. "I knew this day would come," Michael said, surprisingly calm. "I always knew she might come back." "What are we going to do?" "We'll fight. Tommy is our son now. We won't let a stranger take him away. But what if legally we don't have a choice? Then we'll make sure Tommy understands that no matter where he lives, he'll always be our son, and he'll always have a home here with us." The next day, Richard sought out the best family lawyers in the area. The news wasn't encouraging. "Richard," explained attorney Susan Wilson, a family law specialist, "the fact is, Stephanie is the biological mother. Even though she abandoned the child, US law favors biological parents. But Tommy has been with us for 7 years. I understand, and I'll fight with everything I have. But I need to be honest, the odds are slim. The best we can hope for is shared custody, and even that will be difficult." Richard left the attorney's office devastated, How could he explain to Tommy that his life might change completely because of the whims of a woman who had abandoned him? Over the next few days, Richard and Michael debated whether to tell Tommy about the situation. In the end, they decided to be honest, as they always had been. "Tommy, we need to talk to you about something important," Michael said one Saturday afternoon. "Is it about school? I didn't do anything wrong." "No, son, it's about your mother, your biological mother." Tommy looked confused. "What mother? I don't have a mother." "Do you remember the woman who lived with us when you were very little?" Tommy thought for a moment. "A little. She had long hair and wore strong perfume." "That's right. She's back, and she wants you to live with her." Tommy's face filled with fear. "I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you." Richard knelt in front of the boy. "Tommy, we're going to fight for you to stay with us. But the judge might say you have to live with her." "But I don't want to. You're my family." Tommy started crying, and Richard felt his heart break. "No matter what happens, you'll always be our son. You'll always have a home here. Promise?" "I promise." The following week, Stephanie returned with a lawyer. The first hearing was set for a month later. During that month, Richard and Michael tried to keep things normal for Tommy, but it was impossible to hide the tension. The boy began having nightmares and struggling in school. The hearing was one of the hardest moments of Richard's life. Stephanie arrived well-dressed, accompanied by her new husband, a successful businessman, and an expensive lawyer. "Your Honor," Stephanie's lawyer said, "my client acknowledges she made a mistake by leaving her son, but at the time, she was going through severe emotional hardship. Now, with her life stabilized, she wants to resume her role as a mother." The attorney for Richard and Michael argued about the years of care and dedication they had given to Tommy, about the child's emotional stability, and about the trauma an abrupt change could cause. The hardest moment was when the judge asked to speak with Tommy privately. The boy left the room crying and threw himself into Richard's arms. "I told the judge that you're my family, and I don't want to leave." "And what did he say?" "That he'll think about it." But I didn't like the look on his face. 3 weeks later, the decision came. Richard was at the office when the attorney called. "Richard, I have the judge's decision." "And?" "I'm sorry. He granted custody to Stephanie, but established a generous visitation schedule for you. Tommy will live with her but can spend every weekend with you, plus half of his vacations." Richard hung up the phone and cried for the first time since the accident that took his first family. When he got home, he found Michael explaining the situation to Tommy. "When do I have to leave?" Tommy asked, his voice breaking. "Next week. Can I take my things?" "All of them, son." That night, Richard went into Tommy's room to say goodnight, as he always did. "Daddy Richard, do you promise you'll pick me up on the weekend?" "I promise, champ." "And that you won't forget about me during the week?" "Tommy, I could never forget you. You're my son forever. Even if I'm not your blood?" "Family isn't about blood, Tommy. It's about love. And I love you more than anything in this world." End of story. And now, dear listener, what did you think of this touching story? Do you believe love can truly overcome any obstacle? Share your thoughts in the comments about Richard, Michael, and Tommy's journey. Do you think the court's decision was fair? How would you react in their place? Your words mean so much to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other moving stories that stir our deepest emotions.